show on Building Fortunes Radio with your host, motivational speaker Greg Dwyer. Be sure to check out Greg at www.gregdwyer.com. That's www.gregdwyer.com. Now on to our show. Take it away, Greg.
Well, welcome back. We're looking at the word diamond. We started a couple weeks ago with the first letter, D, decide where you are at. We also talked about metaphors, deciding, how you see the world. Is the world a game? Is it a journey? How do you construct reality? And everybody's different. Everybody sees the world differently. So decide, we started with the word or the letter D for diamond. Now we're at the end of the word diamond. We come to another D, and the same word is decide, but it's decide to close the gap or at least to mind the gap. I've been to London a few times. I spoke there a couple years back, traveled there with some folks. I've been there by myself as well. And you'll see signs, or I should say painting, in the different bus stations or train stations, mind the gap, be careful about the gap between, and I guess even New York City too as well. There's a gap between the platform and the train. So that's important. It's a safety issue. So what we're talking about today is minding the gap in your life, or at least deciding to see it first. I think the first step is to see it. Most people don't want to see it. They don't want to see the gap. They just kind of get distracted. I was coming across, I should say, a quote last week. It was Viktor Frankl. And he says, the biggest problem with mankind is not pleasure. It's not that people get caught up in pleasure. It's this feeling of not having meaning in life. And so when people don't have meaning in life, there's what is called a narrative void. So when someone is void of a story or void of meaning in their life, they tend to gravitate towards distraction. And distraction happens with pleasure. Look over here, look over there, dopamine hit, that sort of thing. Kind of makes a lot of sense. And so most people, don't want to talk about this. They don't want to think about their finances. They don't want to think about their health. They don't want to think about their relationships, their marriage, their family, their kids, their future, their career. It's easier, isn't it? It's easier to just kind of get distracted and go from one thing to another, to another, to another. It takes, I really believe this, it takes a lot of courage. It really does take a lot of courage to just simply stop. Just stop. And then pull out paper, maybe a notebook, and write down at the top of the notebook, my health. And say, okay, I went to the doctor. These are the numbers. This is what he's saying. Here's my blood pressure. Here's my weight. This is how much I weigh. I want to close the gap between reality, which is right now, versus where I want this number to be. It's really simple. I think the hard thing is to get people to stop, right? Just to stop and pull out, a pen, a pencil, some paper, and just write down mortgage. How much do I owe on this $1 million house, or $750,000 house, or $350,000 house? How much do I owe on this house right now? And hey, where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 15 years? Where do I want to be in 30 years? It takes courage. It really takes courage for anybody, I really think, because what's easier? It's easier to just whatever. It doesn't matter. Why take life so serious? Just go with the flow. Don't even look at the gap. Don't even mind the gap, and don't even try to close the gap. I think that's most people. However, most people, when they get to be 65, they're dead broke and they're not that healthy. I don't think we want to be like most people. I think if you're watching this now, you don't want to be like most people. Most people don't decide to mind the gap. They just go with the flow. And what takes over are patterns that just are automatic. And I've said this before, we have 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day. 90% of them are the same. what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing, 50% of it is habitual. We don't even have to think about it, which is okay, right? Certain things we want to have on autopilot. But I don't think we want to have our whole life on autopilot. So the last D in Diamond is decide. Just decide to stop and look at the gap. Like for instance, retirement. I was just talking to my nephews about a week ago. We were at a wedding and they were talking about investments, and they were in their 40s, and how I told them to invest in gold 20 years ago. Anyway, to make a long story short, the only way you're going to mind the gap is to measure it, is to say, here's where I am right now. And that's not where I want to be next year. That's not where I want to be in 5 years. That's not where I want to be in a decade. And again, there's only so many categories. When it came to the discussion with my nephews, we were talking about retirement. We're talking about money. I was explaining to them that they have time on their hands, and though I'm not a financial advisor, they kind of look up to me with my financial advice. And I was talking to them about a Roth. I says, why wouldn't you be investing right now in your 40s, or at least, maybe hopefully even earlier than that, in a Roth IRA, and just build retirement money, until you can take that money out and not have to pay taxes, because you've already paid taxes on it. So these are the discussions that I was having with my two nephews. Again, where are you at? Where are you at, bro? That's what I said to my nephew, Pat. I said, Pat, where are you at? Where are you at? And then realize where you want to go, and then close the gap. Specifically, this is where I want it to be. So, as I was saying, in life, there's not a million categories. There really isn't. You have to take care of your health, which is your weight, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, all of those things, sleeping habits, getting enough water. I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not giving medical advice here, but let's face it. I think health is foundational, really. It impacts every single thing and relationship that you do, whether it's your career, your family, wealth building. It's your health, being in shape, being healthy. Looking at the numbers, closing the gap, and getting really serious about that. So what does it take to do that? Just simply measure. Look at the numbers. And then say, hey, where do I want to be? And how am I going to close the gap? How am I going to change this? Now, there are millions of ways to change your health. There's so much information out there. It's not about the information. In fact, we probably have information overload. What it's about is having the courage to simply stop, look, measure, and say, I am not going to live like this anymore, and I'm going to change this area of my life, right? So that's pretty foundational. I would think health is definitely foundational. I said this a couple weeks ago. A person that's healthy, they might have 10, 20, 30 goals for the year or for the decade. Person that's not healthy, they can't get out of bed, they only have only one goal, and that is to be healthy. A lot of times we take our health for granted. Don't. So measure the gap there, decide where you are, close the gap, make it better. Constant and never-ending improvement. The other one is finances. I like this one because it's easy to measure. It really is. It's right up there with health. Finances. Where are you when it comes to debt ratio with your investments, your assets? Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but it takes courage. It really does, to open up the credit card bills, write down, how much you owe versus how much you have as far as assets. Maybe you sit down with a financial advisor. Maybe you do this by yourself or with your family. On one column, you list all of your assets, the things that you own outright. On the other column, you write down all the debt you have. Figure out where you are financially. And maybe you're not satisfied with that. You want to close the gap. You want to improve. I think this is an area that is very delicate, because people don't want to talk about money. They don't want to talk about finances. They don't want to talk about retirement. People think, I could never retire anyway. Why even bother getting into this conversation? Stop. Just stop. Look at the numbers. Open up the Visa, the MasterCard, the Discover. Look at the number. Write it down. Years ago, this was, I don't know what year it was, but many, many years ago, I had a mortgage on a house. And it was my first house. So what I did is I wrote down on a flip chart. I had a flip chart in my office in the basement. So at the top of the flip chart, I wrote down the number that I owed on the house. And then every single month I made a payment that would go to interest and it would also go to principal. But I got the great idea of paying down the house faster and quicker. So I took out a calculator, I figured this all out, and I'm not a very detailed oriented person, but this was really important to me. So what I did is I wrote down, okay, if I make an extra payment every single month for these many cycles, years, I can't remember exactly how long the whole thing was mapped out on a flip chart. It was many pages, right? It wasn't just one page. I looked at this every single month, so the number at the top was large, and then the next number the following month was less, crossed it out. The next month you flip over the paper, less and less. And I kept this in front of me every single week and month until I paid that mortgage off. What I was doing, first of all, this was really important to me. I was just talking to somebody today and they mentioned somebody in, I don't know, they must be in their 60s, 70s, I don't know, maybe even late 70s, and they still have a mortgage. I knew I didn't want to have a mortgage. In fact, the word mortgage means death pledge. I learned that from my friend Jeffrey Combs. And it means to literally be in debt for the whole life. Your whole life you're in debt. That mortgage, death, that's the word, comes from the Latin mortgage, death pledge. And I said, I'm not going to be one of those people that are 65 or 70 still paying off a house. So I wanted to close the gap. And all I did is I kept on writing the numbers down, keeping track of it. And I will tell you, the bank was not always honest. They were not always honest. I'd make an extra payment in October and they would say, oh, Mr. Dwyer, you don't owe us until January. I'm like, no, don't stop. I'm going to pay you every month, and I'm going to pay you not only what I owe you, but on top of it, the principal. And they wouldn't have it. Somehow they just wanted to keep me in debt. And it took like 6 months until we got to a place where we are communicating on the same level. And what I realized is they wanted to keep me in the mortgage for 15 years. I didn't want to be there. What I'm talking about is something you can do with your health, with your finances, with your retirement, with your emotions, with your career. It's easy to do, as Jim Rohn used to say, and it's also easy not to do. Your career, making phone calls, smiling and dialing, being focused on one area of your career or your life and improving it on purpose. Is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible to do it. However, you have to have the courage to look at your numbers. That's why in many cases in businesses, you sit down with your manager. What are you doing? You're looking at the numbers. Maybe you're looking at it weekly, or you're looking at it monthly. Or, you're projecting out where you're going to be in 6 months or 3 months or 2 months or 1 month. It's closing the gap. Now, here is the one thing that gets in our way. And it's our thinking, it's our mind. I was thinking about this today. Our mind is like a diamond that is stuck in the mud. Now there's a metaphor for you. A diamond that's stuck in the mud. Imagine a diamond stuck in the mud. Half of it is underground and the other half is sticking up. The part that's sticking up is your conscious mind. The conscious mind is easily distracted. You're looking here, you're looking there, you're all over the place. People love the adrenaline rush of so many things. I got so many things going on in my life. I'm here, I'm there, and I'm nowhere. The conscious mind is easily distracted. As a magician, I learned this back in the 70s. It's easy to distract a person. It's not that difficult. And so the conscious mind is easily distracted. Now here it is, as I'm taping this, we're almost at the end of August. We're going into September, Labor Day. And before you know it, the year, which is 2023, will be over. People will be going, I can't believe the year's over. Where did it go? People who are focused on mining the gap, they have this understanding about time. They really do. And I mentioned this a couple weeks back about a time calendar where you're checking off every single week of your life and focused on the fact that you do not have forever. You don't have forever to mine this gap. Most people they're distracted. You don't want to be distracted. The second part of the diamond, which is underground, is the programs that are running the show. These are the beliefs, the values. Many of these things were programmed in you from your childhood, the first 8 years of your life. The more you become aware of your beliefs, the more you become aware of your programs, the more you become aware of what's running below the surface, right? You can connect the conscious and the unconscious. And one way to do that is through your imagination. You think about what's important to you. Maybe you imagine that credit card debt goes from $5,000 to $4,000 to $3,000 to $2,000 to $1,000, and it's gone, and now you're in the black. Maybe that's what you think about for 5 minutes every single day. I don't know. It could be the same thing with your health. You're imagining it. You're focusing on it. And right now, what I'm focusing on is a commercial. We'll be back in a few seconds.
You've been listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show, brought to you by motivational speaker Greg Dwyer on buildingfortunesradio.com. Do you wish you could sharpen your focus on what matters most to you and achieve more? Then you owe it to yourself to read Greg's ebook at gregdwyerebook.com. That's www.gregdwyerebook.com. Download it today and give it away. As always, we want to thank you for listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio with motivational speaker Greg Dwyer. Now back to our show. Take it away, Greg.
We're talking about minding the gap or closing the gap. We started when we talked about the word diamond with deciding where you are, deciding how you see the world. It takes great courage to see where you want to be, the desired lifestyle, versus where you are now. Let's face it, most people, they don't want to think about these things. They don't want to look at their credit card bill. They want to look at their mortgage. They want to look at retirement. They don't want to have a conversation about their health or their family, their relationship, or their career. So if you're thinking about this, congratulations, it takes a lot of courage. Because what you're looking at is a lack, right? Like you're here and you want to be here. So there is a lack there. And a lot of times when people look at the lack, oh, I'm not good enough, it's not going to work, I don't know, there's uncertainty, all of that psychological baggage. That's what gets people not to look at this. They'd rather be distracted. So as I was saying, our mind is like a diamond stuck in the mud. The conscious mind is here, there, and everywhere and nowhere. It's constantly being distracted, new shiny things. And then the unconscious is underneath the mud, underneath the ground, and it's being programmed by programs that you're probably not aware of. So I was counseling someone the other day. We were talking about debt management. And one of the things that came up was this idea of scarcity. I don't know if I have enough. I don't know if I'll be enough. I don't know if there's enough. I don't know if I'm going to have enough. So this program, it was discovered, was running behind the surface. And if that's true, then someone's going to keep themselves in debt, wouldn't they? It would make sense because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So no matter how much this person tried to save, they put themselves back in the same financial situation over and over again. Why? Because this pattern or this belief was running below the surface. Or the person, you've heard this before, the man, the woman that gets into a abusive relationship, maybe they get divorced, they move on, they marry somebody else, it's the same person. Or they married their father, or they married their mother type of personality. Why? Because these programs from our childhood or these beliefs that are not examined are running the show. So bringing the conscious and the unconscious mind together, connecting it through your imagination is the first step. Now, how do you do it? Well, imagine you have no mortgage and that's all you think about. You write that down, you think about it, you say it to yourself to the point where it finally becomes a reality. Or if you're 250 pounds, maybe you want to be down to 200. So you're constantly thinking about this. You're daydreaming. You know, I have no problem with the word hypnosis. And I think it's the same hypnosis that people are in when they pick up their cell phone and 25 minutes goes by. But we could use the word daydreaming. Daydreaming is fine. It's kind of the same thing. Experts say that we daydream about 30% of our life away. So a lot of times people just look out the window and maybe they'll daydream about maybe the cruise they're going on this October. And they'll think about that. Okay, fine. Or they'll daydream about nothing. They'll just space out. People who are successful and really focused, they use this time of daydreaming to tap into their imagination, which automatically puts them into a hypnotic state, so they're focusing on what's important to them. And whether they know it or not, what they're doing is they're closing the gap in their imagination first. They're taking action first in their imagination. And they're doing this over and over again to the point that when they have to do it in reality, it's easy. Let's face it, most people don't want to take new action. You know, I'm afraid, I've never done this before. I don't know how this is going to be. That's what stops most people. But when you daydream or you put yourself in a hypnotic state and you think about what you desire over and over again, you're basically reprogramming your brain, your mind, and you're taking action in your dreams, in your daydreaming during the day, and perhaps at night when you're sleeping. I remember, this goes back to the 70s and 80s when I was a magician. I was performing birthday shows and stage shows and parlor shows in the 70s, and it kind of stopped once I went to college. But once I went to college, and this was like 82, for I would say 5 years, I kept dreaming about being a performer. Not daydreaming. In my dreams at night, I would have dreams of walking on stage. I would have dreams of seeing the audience and the lights. This went on for at least 5 years. It was in my consciousness, you know, from 72 to 82 for a decade. And it was getting repeated over and over again. I worked at the theater, I worked backstage for Doug Henning, I did my own shows, I was on television, I was in newspapers, constantly over and over and over again, to the point when I stopped and I went to college and I went into a totally different direction, my unconscious still brought these images up to the surface in my dreams at night. Why am I telling you this? No matter what you desire to close the gap in your life, all you have to do is reprogram your mind by tapping into your imagination, by constantly thinking and using daydreaming to condition or reprogram your mind. That's the only way to get unstuck. And in the process of doing it in your imagination first, that when the opportunity appears, which it will, you just simply take action. I have to tell you a quick story. We're filming a demo reel for my business. So we're putting together this 3 to 4 minute demo reel. And I was thinking about different places that we were going to record this. So I picked up a card the other day from somebody that I know, and I went to visit them. And where this place was, there was a beautiful, beautiful stage. Now, this sounds like magic, but I was putting it out there in my daydreaming. I was putting it out there in my journaling and in my thinking. And I had no connection in my mind between this person and this beautiful stage. Like, I didn't even think it through. Picked up the card, went and visited this person, and then when I walked in, I said, wow, you're at a beautiful place here and a beautiful stage. Absolutely gorgeous. What I'm talking about is when you are aligning your conscious and unconscious mind using imagination, your imagination, and reprogramming your mind, and you're putting it out there what you want. You start noticing, like you've noticed this, you know, you buy, I don't know, maybe you buy a Mazda, or you buy a Toyota, or you buy a red car or black car, whatever, a certain car, and then you start seeing it everywhere. Well, they've been everywhere, it's just that now that you bought it, you start seeing these cars everywhere. The mind is powerful, and by reprogramming your mind, using your imagination, you can take that diamond which is stuck in the mud, which is running programs which are not helping, and also by being distracted, not helping, you can change that. And that's why we're talking about diamond mind, what it takes. Decide where you are, decide how to close the gap. So let me close with this. One of the easiest ways for you to close the gap, and it works for me, and what I'm sharing with you I have done for many years, since 2009, is to have a journal, a gratitude journal. I'm not saying you have to sit down every night and write, 10 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. I'm not even saying you have to write a paragraph. What I'm saying is, one way to mind the gap is to write down 5 things every single day or night that you're grateful for. Or just take notes on your life. You know, today a friend came by, you know, today this happened. Now, in the moment it seems silly, like why would I do this? Like why would I record what's going on? In retrospect, as you look back, you start seeing patterns. You start seeing patterns of thinking and how your thinking is changing over 12 months, over 5 years, over a decade. I've been doing this since 2009. It's probably one of the most prized possession that I have, rather than the books that I read. It's having this journal. Now I'm going to tell you something embarrassing, but hopefully it'll help. The other day I came across a notebook which was from a seminar that I went to, I think it was April. It was April 8th, 2022. So right now it's August 2023. And I opened up the notebook and I looked at some of the notes that I took, which is kind of a snapshot of what I was thinking back on April 8th, 2022. Not my journal, just a notebook that I brought to a seminar that I went to and attended. And inside was my own handwriting. There was about 5 or 6, 10 things on the piece of paper. But one of the things that was on the paper was something that I said I was going to do in my career. And since, I haven't done much of it. I really haven't done much of it at all. And so I looked at that and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I've been thinking about this since April of 2022, which is a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, and I have done some, not a lot, not nothing, but not a lot to close the gap. And I looked at it and I went, I can't believe that I've been thinking about this for a year and a half. Now that started a little bit of a fire underneath me to say, Greg, this is what you said you were going to do. You have done a little bit of it, but you haven't done a lot about it, and you haven't been consistent. What's going on? And I'm thinking, okay, I have been distracted, right? Or programs running behind the surface so that I'm not following through. So what I'm sharing with you is one of the secret weapons for you to close the gap is this. It's powerful. You know, when I need time to reflect and I don't know where to go other than to sit quietly in a room, I take my journal. Maybe I take 2022 or I take 2019 and I open it up. Maybe I pick a date and I go, what was going on August 20th of 3 years ago? What was I thinking 3 years ago? You open up and hopefully you start to see improvement, right? You want to see improvement. You want your life to improve, to get better. And I can't think of a better way of doing that than to journal. Now, I'm not, like I say, I don't mean that you need to sit down and you need to write endlessly every single night. Sometimes I just write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. I close the book and that's it. Or sometimes I'll write, you know, this happened today, maybe a sentence, but rarely, really rarely am I writing a paragraph. I'm just writing a little bit of a notes to let me know where I am right now. And where I am right now in this broadcast is I only have 90 seconds left. So next week we're going to dive into the word mind, M-I-N-D, which is 4 episodes, and then the last one is a bonus. So we have 5 episodes left. That brings us through 12 episodes. That's 12 hours of material. But what it really comes down to is this, and this is what I've learned over the years of studying this. Most people get focused. Very few people stay focused. The way to do it is to use your imagination, to put yourself in a trance so that you're thinking about this over and over and over again to the point that it becomes automatic. So you're thinking about closing the gap, you're writing it down, you're listening to it, you're obsessed about it, and then all of a sudden the opportunity appears and you take action to close the gap. All right, we'll talk to you next week. Next week, the topic is going to be M for mind. Talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show, brought to you by motivational speaker Greg Dwyer on buildingfortunesradio.com.
10 seconds.
Check out Greg at gregdwyer.com. Be sure to download his ebook at gregdwyer.com. stay focused on what matters most to you. That's www.gregdwyerebook.com. We want to thank you for listening, and go make a difference in your world.